And I just wanted to kind of welcome everyone again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Virtual Summer School Series, Fostering Health and Wellbeing Across Extension. We are excited to have so many of you joining us today. I'm Emily Smith, Program Associate in the Community Professional and Economic Development Unit, the University of Arkansas System, Division of Agriculture, Cooperative Extension Service. Today's session is focused on institutional commitment to health and well-being. We're going to have two co-facilitators assisting with us today with the Q&A and chat. Thank you to Megan Laughlin-Crust. She's the training program developer and instructional designer at Michigan State University Extension. And also thank you to Dr. Armenta Lockhart, program manager of online learning at the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service. Today's session is all about how institutions can support health and well-being. Employee success can be improved through a commitment by institutions and extension programs leading, supporting, and encouraging health and well-being. This session will discuss policies, practices, and other strategies leadership can implement to support employee wellness. In addition, the importance of creating a positive and supportive work culture, even with remote work environments, will be addressed. Now, let's introduce our speaker. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Paul Hill, an extension professor for Utah State Extension University, where he designs, leads economic development programs in rural counties through the Rural Online Initiative that he founded in 2018. He is a past recipient of the Utah Governor's Medal for Science Technology, as well as 32 other state and national awards for his innovative programs, impacts, research, and publications. And with that, I'm going to hand it off. Welcome, Dr. Hill.
All right. It's good to be with everyone today, especially all of my peers in NAEP SDP. I've been a member. I remember attending one of the first conferences in 2015 I think it was 2015 or 16 in San Diego. So really appreciate the invitation to discuss institutional commitment to health and well-being and extension. And we know that employee success and overall effectiveness, it can be improved through organizations' commitment and extensions programs supporting and encouraging health and well-being. And so today I wanted to really put a remote work spin on this, as many as we saw remote work accelerate over the last few years, the adoption of it, and really talk about the importance of creating a positive and supportive work culture that acknowledges remote work and includes remote work as a benefit. And so a few things to acknowledge is that physical and mental health, there are physical and mental health risks in a remote work environment, and those include things, and I'll talk more about them, but isolation, a sedentary lifestyle, as well as burnout. And so the way that institutions and leaders can support employee health and well-being is through policies and practices such as providing ergonomic equipment or offering such flexible hours, and as well as encouraging employees to take breaks and remind them to exercise. These things are somewhat easier to do when you're working in the same office, but when employees are out of sight, out of mind, they need to be intentional. And when we don't see everyone every single day. And so really it's so important to create a positive and supportive work culture, especially in the remote work environment where there's certainly a challenge of presence. So to get started, I want to kind of address like how I got involved in remote work research and what does that have to do with extension. So the mission of the Remote Online Initiative is really to prepare rural workforces for the future. And so I work in community and economic development, and so we looked at the needs of our rural communities, and we decided that offering online research, cohort-based courses that help us address the labor needs in our rural communities. We saw some significant needs in rural as far as employment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But really, our work in this area has has really been important as the pandemic accelerated many trends from streaming services, e-commerce, food delivery platforms, and really the widespread adoption of remote work. But in a lot of ways, instead of taking advantage of the opportunity to improve how we work, most organizations simply took their offices online, along with all the bad habits that permeated them. So a move to a better way of working remotely is really desperately needed. And if your digital transformation as organizations move, I'm sure many of us, we started an extension, or some of us, when we were doing our P-card statements on paper, and maybe they have moved off. Hopefully they have, and we've moved more towards a digital a transformation, digital first. And it's going to be, in order for that to be successful, you need to give employees the right tools and systems to work in this distributed, in this digital distributed virtual environment. And so unfortunately, a lot of digital tools are only effective as you, how effectively you use them, and really that alignment between leadership and employees on remote work best practices, it will be critical to the success of any initiative and move towards digital transformation. And so the work we've done, I've looked at the adoption of remote work. We've looked at and studied the factors that affect remote workers' job satisfaction in Utah, and I'll talk more about that, as well as the evaluation of the ROI, the Remote Online Initiative program, that helps people in rural communities find remote jobs, as well as helps leaders lead remote teams of distributed employees. So where this all started, just like any extension program, every program is an intervention that addresses the gap between what is and what should be. And so as a land grant institution, everything we do is research based and really must address community needs. So the needs in our rural Utah, which are not very different from many rural communities, is we had higher than average unemployment in our rural communities compared to the statewide unemployment levels. We saw in rural areas that older populations, so young people not seeing a future, they would leave between at 18 when they get out of high school to the young adult years, and they leave for education, for work opportunities, and our rural communities, because of that, many rural communities have traditionally have over relied on extraction industries, mining and agriculture and timber and so forth, and so they're more susceptible I guess they're when there are economic shocks in certain industries, they are very susceptible to really destroying the economy in that community if the mine closes or other such things. And then of course the need that in our statewide needs assessment identified the need for well-paying jobs. So yes, there are jobs in rural Utah, but the residents feel that they need more reliable, steady, well-paying jobs in these communities. So we designed our program as a way to address those needs. And in 2018, we received legislative funding. There's a bill to develop a remote work training program to help people in rural communities find remote jobs. And so that over the medium-term impacts we were able to show by placing hundreds of people in remote jobs, we're able to get ongoing funding. And since that time, we've received some additional federal funding for some projects, as well as additional state funding for a career pathway for people who work in sales, and then a new legislative pilot program, which is just coming on board this fiscal year, that's focused on helping rural businesses develop e-commerce adopt e-commerce digital tools so that they can begin to sell their products online as well. So those are the things, that's this kind of the space I work in, and what got me interested in remote work and just the idea of distributed work. So in our course, in our program, we offer a course in helping those who are seeking remote work opportunities, who are wanting to improve their remote work skills and make themselves more marketable in the job market. And so these things we teach talk about digital communication, productivity, time management, and dealing with growing within an organization when you're not, you're kind of out of sight, out of mind, which is the challenge for leaders. So we have that course. We also teach a leadership course for leaders as they work to the ultimate challenge of being a leader in a distributed organization is not having your employees nearby. And so communicating vision and building a culture, dealing with conflict management when everyone's working at a distance. And so these are both like 4-week online hybrid courses. And so really the professional course is meant to increase that demand for remote work. In 2018, not a lot of people in rural communities in Utah wanted remote jobs. They didn't know how to go about them. They didn't know it was really an option. And so our course and our program is meant to address those needs, but also simultaneously we needed to help leaders in our urban counties of the state. There was a really tight labor market and they were looking for additional talent. And we came to them and said, hey, there's a lot of people unemployed and looking to improve their employment status in rural communities. If you tap into that, we could help you. And so the leadership course is really meant to address the supply of remote jobs. And so here's just a quick little 1-minute video all about just kind of explaining our program.
Do you feel limited by the lack of career opportunities available in your rural community? Are your skills being underutilized in your current position? Are the only available job opportunities miles away from your hometown? Whether you call it telecommuting or remote work, you can have a great job that lets you work from anywhere without having to leave your community. All you need is a reliable internet connection, a designated workspace, a good computer, and you're good to go. With jobs in medicine, education, finance, customer service, and more, remote work provides all kinds of exciting career opportunities. But even with all these opportunities, transitioning to a new job can be intimidating. The Rural Online Initiative was created to help you prepare for the journey with training, remote work experience, and job placement support. So, ready to start the journey to your remote career? Contact us today.
All right, so that's really a little bit of background in what got us in USU Extension in developing a specialized remote work training program. But recognizing really the value of remote work, USU has even developed a telework policy, and we can put that link in the chat. But Extension, I would really like to say that Extension started remote work as classical Extension agents worked off campus at the county level, back in the days of Smith-Lever Act and so forth, and the beginning of our first land-grant institutions. We really pioneered this idea of remote work. Of course, we didn't call it that, but there are many benefits to being remote, and there's benefits that address that help the individual as well as the organization and society overall. So I'll drop a few we'll identify some of these and talk about them, but really productivity, that's one of the first ones. And that's one that leaders have kind of take issue with if they oppose, say, remote work in some fashion. But productivity is really influenced by stress, interruptions, asynchronous, synchronous work, as well as a commute. There's been many studies that show the negative effect of commutes on productivity, as well as like family problems. And so having some dependent care responsibilities and distractions at home can really influence negatively productivity and performance. And so there's been plenty of studies that have shown productivity increases with remote work when remote work occurs at home, and then others that show that it doesn't. And so, I stay close to those studies. And then one thing we do know is that job satisfaction, employees, when they feel like they're doing a good job and they are productive, they are happier in their jobs. And so with that first poll, if we want to just share those results again, how remote work has impacted your job satisfaction, we see that the majority of you say, hey, yeah, it's it's improved my job satisfaction, being able to have that flexibility. And so maybe that's for some of these reasons, less commute stress, more favorable work-life balance. You're gaining on average, a few studies have shown that you're saving about 70 minutes a day. How you use those 70 minutes a day, that kind of depends. Some employees end up spending that time working more, and that can affect job satisfaction in a negative way. And so we have to be careful, and that's why we teach these courses, because this is a new modality of work, and an extension needs to be at the forefront of it, helping individuals as well as organizations address these new challenges. So we talked about this greater ability to fulfill dependent care responsibility, as well as the cost of commuting, the cost of people tend to shower less when they're working from home. They also tend to do their makeup less, or not have to buy clothes. And so there's quite a bit of savings from not commuting and going in, which equate to, on average, some studies and articles have expressed that to be around $4,000 a year. And the fact that location independence, there is a benefit to being able to have a portable job where you can live and you can, say, own a home where you can afford to live. And so, and this overall, that ease of time pressure, not having to be, being fully remote. Now there's the hybrid option, which does kind of require you to be nearby the office from time to time and going in on somewhat of a regular basis, but it does, having that flexibility there does ease time pressures. So thank you for taking that poll. The benefits for the organization, why it's beneficial for organizational leaders to adopt remote work, is that really the top one is loyalty. Remote workers, they appreciate, the research has shown that they appreciate the opportunity to work remotely so much that they end up working harder in order to maximize their performance while on the clock. Now, it's also while they're off the clock too. So there has been a lot of times the first argument of a leader, say someone who might be opposed or reluctant to adopt remote work, is, well, how do I know if they're working? And the studies have shown that people are more inclined to overwork and work more hours because of the benefit that they value the policy so much. And so it's really become this tired argument of, like, are they shirking from home or working from home? They are actually overworking from home, and leaders need to be cognizant of that, because overworking can lead to burnout. Not having establishing those boundaries can lead to employees, looking for another job that doesn't stress them out so much. And it may be that leaders are oblivious to that. And so we teach in our leadership course to pay attention to when emails are sent, when messages are sent, when you're noticing an employee is responding on via email at 3 a.m. That's cause for concern. It's something we should look for. So overworking is a more common problem. Now, being able to access, not all the best talent in the world lives in the same zip code. And so being able to diversify your workforce, I know at USU, in our telework policy, we very few, we do have remote workers in our university, but very few live outside the state of Utah. So there are, you have to have some limitations there, but there are tremendous financial savings for an organization on buildings, utilities, as well as maintenance, cleaning, not cleaning as much when employees aren't in, and then the other provisions such as like having a coffee shop or food. Some organizations have restaurants and so forth. I haven't, if anyone knows of any restaurants in extension offices, let me know. But on campus there are some, as well as the savings from equipment and furniture and so forth. So being able to access talent outside these geographic areas is such a benefit to organizations, and really that loyalty goes a long way. It really, I think, is more important than the overhead costs. But ultimately, business continuity during times of extreme weather, pandemics, global conflicts is a huge benefit. So if we could pull up the results of that second poll, which aspect of remote work had the biggest impact? It looks like we'll come back. The flexibility. So being able to manage your work-life balance, that was 70% of you said that. Now, a few of you said, those feelings of isolation that you experienced during remote work, that's difficulty, as well as, one person said that difficulty setting boundaries. So maybe extensions, because we started remote work, we've gotten a lot better at it, but it's difficult managing work-life balance. Thanks for sharing that. So moving on to the benefits for society. It's great to have well-paying, diverse jobs in rural communities. Having more time, as if you have children, to spend with them, and save that 70 minutes or so, an hour of savings each day, can go a long way in a community as far as volunteering and serving as a rec sports coach or a city council member. In Utah, it was very important for us to address air quality. We have a lot of poor air quality in our urban areas. And then the deterioration of our roads was important, but also, we saw that remote work was effective in helping prevent the spread of contagious diseases, as well as that continuity of business operations. If we weren't able to work remote during the pandemic, for us knowledge workers, that would have crippled the economy. We saw financial institutions such as Goldman Sachs report record profits, and everyone worked remotely, and then yet their CEO wants everyone back to the office. So there's cultural issues there, as well as a lot of employers, if they had practiced remote work, even if it was just for continuity of business operations, but if they had practiced it before the pandemic, they had my studies showed that they had a very positive experience with remote work when they had to put it in practice. So kind of like the reason why we have at least when I grew up in California, we had earthquake drills, and the point of the earthquake drill was to prepare in case there was an earthquake. And we have fire drills and earthquake drills in Utah as well at work. And organizations should be practicing remote work on a regular basis, even if it's just for those continuity of business operations. But we wouldn't able to sustain our economy like we did if it wasn't for remote work, if it wasn't for the technology that was in place that we had been somewhat underutilizing. But also, we have in certain parts of our state of Utah, we have a bit of a housing crisis, where housing costs have gone up. Anywhere in the Mountain West, we've seen drastic increases in people moving from east to the Midwest to the Mountain West, and especially in Idaho, Nevada, and Utah, and so Arizona. And so that's driven up house prices. But there's there's an answer to this, and that's through remote work. People can move to more rural communities and help those improve. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because then the rural communities get mad because these people who look and think differently come in and want to change things. And so that's another side of it, but we won't get into that today. So people are practicing remote work. As you're having this experience, there are unique challenges. And so studies involving remote employees have shown the practice is linked to, when we talk about health and well-being, poor sleep, trouble with relaxing, and even mental health concerns. And so it poses a risk to our physical health as well. And so without having a commute to the office, remote workers, they can experience a more sedentary lifestyle, which can lead to blood clots and other long-term health issues. And so in addition, excess screen time can worsen eyesight, cause migraines, and working from home can really make it easier to pick up or even just indulge in bad habits like unwanted weight gain, smoking, drinking, just excessive snacking. And so if we want to pull up the last poll question, want to know what support that you shared you felt like you needed, and it looked like the most was just that professional development, career advancement. We'll get into that as well and see how that affects job satisfaction as well as personal well-being. But a lot of you also said that ergonomic equipment and tips for maintaining physical health is really important. So some of you have realized that it's hard establishing boundaries. It's a common physical problem with remote workers is neck strain and then weight gain, because the kitchen's just a few steps away, and so it's easier to make frequent visits. So one thing I want to talk about is those physical mental health risks, and what organizations can do as leaders, as being concerned about employees that are as we lead at a distance, even just in extension offices that are away from us, what we can do to be aware of these challenges and what we can do to address them. So these challenges I've talked about, regarding communication. So there, when it comes to remote work, there's and really even just in extension, as we're collaborating across county lines, across state lines, communication and collaboration, that's just hard, as well as dealing with feelings of isolation and disconnection. If you're a leader and I talk to my immediate supervisor just a few times a year. Some people are great with that, like me. Others feel very disconnected, and they can express feelings of isolation, disconnection from colleagues and really the broader work environment. And so studies have shown that remote employees are more prone to loneliness and may struggle with maintaining a sense of belonging in an organization, which leads to turnover. And really those blurred boundaries between work and personal life are an issue. Remote work, again, it leads to those blurred boundaries and really resulting in stress and burnout. Research really highlights the challenge of maintaining work-life balance when you're physically separated between work and home, when that's diminished. And when the lines between work and home diminish, a new line between you and your colleagues it arises. And so when we look at these challenges, look at all the ones I've highlighted that are physical, that deal with mental health. And so these are things that as leaders at our institutions, we need to look at. We need to set guidelines and policies to address these things. So really the physical challenges, remote work really can present those physical challenges to like inadequate workspace setups and just poor economics, or ergonomics. So if you're not aware of how your employees are doing as far as their proper ways of sitting at a desk all day, if they're not getting outside enough, those are common problems. So the research highlights the importance of having comfortable, ergonomically optimized workstations to prevent musculoskeletal issues such as back pain, neck strain, eye strain. And these are the difficulties that remote employees face, and really any knowledge worker who's working at a desk for the most of the day. And so promoting programs and training. And the thing is Extension has a lot of already great, excellent resources that promote good posture, proper lighting, just suitable equipment for working in an office. I recently saw a publication about how tips on gardening in ways that won't hurt your back. So we have a lot of these resources already. It's utilizing these when we have distributed employees. And so a lot of people say, hey, we're just going to get through this. We're going to push through it. Remote work's not really going to stick around very long. And really, when you look at it, the office came into being when the world of work involved just processing lots of paper. And so the fact that it remained so dominant for so long could reflect a market failure. And so before COVID, the world could have possibly been stuck in a bad equilibrium in which remote work was less prevalent than it should have been. The technology was there, it was in place, but it was somewhat underutilized. A lot of people just didn't want to change. And so the pandemic represents an enormous shock that's could be, that has put the world in a new and maybe perhaps better equilibrium. And so one thing that we've looked at in our research as well as others is that remote work is really here to stay. So as institutions, as we're concerned about the well-being and health of our employees, we need to recognize that this is the new normal, that we need to begin to make these policies. And the USU's telework policy is a great resource, as well as many other institutions have put these together. And we should be updating these. It shouldn't just be oh, hey, we made the policy, we're good to go. We want to continually make these better, survey employees, get their feedback on ways we can improve. But some of the reasons why remote work as an innovation, it becoming institutionalized, some of the reasons why it's expected to stick long term are because people have invested time and money in equipment, as well as the training to utilize these tools. And so as they use these tools, they get more comfortable using them, and they don't want to stop using them. They found that it's effective. And so on average, remote workers have invested at least 15 hours of time. And this was back in 2021, as well as over $500 in in-home equipment. And so in addition, really the stigma that's associated with remote work diminished during COVID. People had a positive experience with the practice that had some experience with it before. And even those that didn't believe that their institution would, because of the overall positive experience, that they would continue the practice in the future. And so one other interesting fact is that the share of U.S. patent applications that advance remote work technologies, it more than doubled from January to September of 2020. And since then, it has greatly surpassed previous peaks. And so what that means is that the technology we're using right now, for instance, Zoom and other softwares, team collaboration software, say Asana, Slack, Microsoft Teams, you go down the list. All these technologies aren't the same versions that we're using now, aren't the same versions as the ones in 2019. Zoom, I think, started in 2012. And so the interface has changed, technology's gotten better. I definitely see us moving to this Jedi Council type of meetings where we're holograms or whatnot. Yeah, now those don't replace, the best option is in person, right? But when that's not economically feasible, financially feasible, the next best thing is these virtual technologies, and they've really taken off. And so the unanticipated implementation of remote work due to COVID, it required millions of people to experiment with the practice, and that altered their views and their plans going forward about remote. And so it's here to stay. It's sticking around, and we need to get good at it. We need to, as leaders, develop these solutions. And so some of the solutions that I proposed that have been proposed in other studies in academia, as well as in practice, are setting clear communication expectations. So establishing specific communication channels that and guidelines that ensure effective communication among remote teams. Some organizations have gone as far as to shut off email for certain levels of employees after business hours, and really setting expectations as leaders for response times and preferred communication methods, and really availability to minimize misunderstanding and promote transparency. So we want to limit the conflict in the workplace, and as people work remotely, setting those expectations when, hey, if you've got really important information to share with me, call me. If it's just kind of some passing along information, do it via email or in this DM channel in Slack or something like that. But thinking about the proper communication for different types of the work we do is critical, and even shutting off communication for some employees, with some exceptions for emergencies and so forth. But it's remote work and communication is getting better all the time. And so as leaders, we need to also be establishing regular check-ins and have regular virtual meetings. So scheduling those. The new generation is used to, when they play video games and social media, their instant gratification takes too long. So they want instant feedback, because as soon as they post a picture, they're seeing how many people like that picture. When they're playing their video games, they're getting instant feedback on the health of their player, the performance of their player, and so forth. And so they're used to those types of feedback. And so getting an annual review once a year and hearing once a year how well you're doing, we need to have more regular check-ins, and then virtual team meetings need to foster connection and collaboration, and so they can be used to discuss projects as well as address challenges, and really used to maintain a sense of team cohesion, and but also not forget about the value of in-person meetings, and doing the things in person that we can't necessarily do virtually. So the best way, some of the things we've seen in remote work that have really lagged with organizations is that mentoring. When organizations go fully remote or hybrid, the mentoring declines, and that it declines because people are just not in person, and it's hard to ask for help in certain ways from your peers. And so being intentional about mentoring, but also establishing times when you can be physically together, and then dedicate that time to team building, to generating ideas, and then mentoring. And then when you go remote, when you go back home, you go back to your co-working spaces or your extension offices, then you do that deep work, you do that collaboration. So it's like coming up with an idea for an article. Yeah, do that in person. And then when you are, when you go back to your counties, when you go back to your homes, that's when you can work on the deep work and the collaboration and understanding the tools that are available to you as you collaborate on those things. And so it's important to have virtual team building activities, as you can't do them in an in-person office. But being intentional about those. I think at Extension, we're really good about recognition and rewards, but we have to be careful not to forget about the employees who are remote or hybrid that don't come in a lot. It's harder for them to feel like they're included. And again, a lot of these things, the detrimental things is like poor mental health, not feeling connected to the team, and then having a really talented person leave and exit the organization, all because there were a few things you could have done to retain them and made them feel appreciated and valued. And so employee recognition and awards, and recognition could be something as simple as a handwritten note. There's developing a comprehensive virtual onboarding and training programs that support remote employees. It's just not the same in person versus remote. And so providing them with the necessary resources, tools, and training to ensure just that smooth transition onto the team, into the organization, and then also by intentionally assigning mentors. And then what I've done within my team is buddies to help them navigate the remote work environment effectively. Sometimes it's just hard when you're alone and you haven't really been properly introduced to everyone on the team. You don't really know who to ask, and sometimes you have a question, you think it might be a dumb question, but no one's told you, so you just kind of remain silent, and then eventually you start looking for another job while you're on the clock. So you want to avoid those things. But the policies and guidelines, they establishing those clear remote work policies and guidelines that address things like expectations, performance evaluations, and the best practices of remote work. These things communicate to remote employees that you care, and that they're meant to ensure that they have access to all the tools, the equipment, and the resources to perform their jobs effectively. A lot of times you tend to feel employees, the studies have shown that they feel like if not done well, they're on this island unto themselves. They don't have people to reach out to. And many employees during COVID, we saw with the Great Resignation, they didn't feel connected. And people, again, they moved their offices online, they moved their work online, and then they just didn't recognize that, the environment's changed, but we still need to stay connected. We still need to make sure people have the tools, equipment, and resources necessary to do their jobs, even though we can't see. If you had an employee sitting in an office without a computer, you'd say, oh, they need some tools, right? And if you can't see that, you don't know what the issues are. And so making sure that you're intentional about these things. These are things that we teach in our leadership course as well as our professional course, and things that we can look to, specific red flags as far as mental health, and providing resources. USU has some great mental health resources where there benefits that employees can talk to counselors, talk to mental health professionals. I think it was like 6 times a year if they felt like it, and then of course. A way to foster a sense of belonging and inclusion is providing opportunities to grow in professional development, and doing that together in teams. And so those are some solutions that the research has pointed out that help organizations maintain that commitment to employee physical and mental health, and overall just job satisfaction and well-being. So we did a study. It was just published this year, and so it's important to kind of point out. I'll explain this this figure, but compensation and recognition, those are like totally important, but they can't guarantee job satisfaction for remote workers. And this was our study of remote workers in Utah. But there's not really one thing you can do as a leader to directly impact job satisfaction. So as you see here, a lot of things we're engaged in, these HR bundles, things that focus on like policies. You're thinking a lot of people, they'll be advocates for remote work, and they'll say, you need to do this. It's going to change your employee's life. They're going to be happier, and they're going to get more time. They're going to feel more productive, and they're just going to be so great, and they'll never leave. If you just have a remote work policy, and that's just not true. And so there's not one thing you can do as a leader to directly impact job satisfaction and personal well-being. And that's really the gist of the article. But you just don't want to make employees, if you don't make employees' lives a living hell, you can actually contribute to their personal well-being. And so you can do all these things perfectly. And if they're going through if they have personal issues of a child being sick, they're going through relationship issues, like there's not much you can do to affect their personal well-being and make it better. But if you do some bad things, you can really make it worse. And so if you focus on improving job satisfaction, that will, by the policies and procedures, those guidelines, and things that you can do. For instance, like when you look at organizational culture, that LMX there, that's leader member exchange. That's your relationship with your supervisor. If that can be positive, that's connected to amotivation, and amotivation is just lacking when an employee lacks purpose and value, and that's negatively associated with personal well-being. So if you just have if you just have a positive relationship with your employee, you're gonna be able to help them just maintain a regular level of personal well-being, as well as creating that work culture and having ways to include them. So in encouraging remote workers to really define their personal values, hiring is so important. So looking at employees as they define their personal values, it really helps when they bring their personal values and they realize that, hey, those connect with the organization. So you want to hire people whose personal values align with the values of the organization, and that's going to positively affect job satisfaction. That aligns with self-efficacy, being able and intrinsic motivation, ability to do your job well, and know that it's you're fulfilling your purpose as you do your job well, and that's going to affect your personal well-being directly. So now, so a lot of the things that we can address is hiring, making sure we're hiring people who are intrinsically motivated, looking at things that they're motivated to do outside of work, and then that effective commitment is loyalty. We saw that remote work, employees are very loyal to their organizations. They love remote work, but that's just one way that it indirectly affects job satisfaction. I want to talk a little bit about opportunity. Employees need to feel that there's upward mobility, there's growth within the organization. And so as you involve them in organizational decisions and larger team decisions, as you seek their feedback and making and establishing policies, they feel included, they feel more loyalty to the organization. And then again, in the polls, you talked to, many of you mentioned that promotion, upward mobility, career advancement, professional development, those were valuable to you. Yes, because those types of investment show that your employer cares, and then that's going to affect your job satisfaction, which will indirectly affect your your personal well-being. And so human resource kind of practices like training programs and programs that leadership programs for upward mobility, they reduce we found that they reduce amotivation levels, and they increase employee satisfaction. And so there are high performance work systems, such as like training programs, having clear job expectations, doing performance appraisals regularly, making sure employees understand that there's job security and there's opportunity to move up. Those all contribute to job satisfaction. And so asking employees for feedback goes a very, very long way. So as a leader, spending some one-on-one time just asking for employees for their feedback on how you're doing your job and how well you're leading, that addresses job satisfaction through effective commitment and then lowering amotivation. And so there's a link there, and we'll provide a link to that study in the chat as well. But those are the factors that affect remote workers' job satisfaction, and as well as like the participants in the study, they weren't all like say fully remote, so they had to work at least partially like remote. So many of them were hybrid or fully remote employees, much like extension professionals. So just one last plug. It's hard to lead a team. I think, again, the ultimate challenge of being a leader of remote employees is just not being there. I think it was Drucker who he popularized the concept of management by walking around. And so you could see needs and in a warehouse, in a factory, all by just walking around. So he's like promoted that with leaders. You need to walk around, regularly, because you're going to see, that's how you're going to see things. You can't just get it all from reports and those types of data sources. You need to make some observations. And so that's a challenge when you can't exactly do that when you're just in Zoom meetings and Slack channels and so forth. So our leadership course, it really does a good job at and our evaluations show that people who've taken the course, they increase their knowledge in communicating vision and improving culture and communication and helping employees to improve their own performance within the organization. And so that's something I just want to remind everyone about. But really want to thank you for your time today and welcome questions. And I'll mention, so if you work in community development and you're like, oh, these courses, these things, they would be a good thing for my state in addressing, say, rural unemployment and negative net migration and well-paying jobs. Then we actually have an affiliate program for other states. So recently, Idaho, north of us, they got some funding from their legislature, and they're implementing in partnership with us. They're implementing the program and helping people find remote jobs. And so again, I just want to make sure everyone was aware of that. And then I'll provide my references here. But welcome questions.
So Dr. Hill, we have 4 questions in the inbox, and the first 2 are very similar. So it's the feedback that we hear from educators is that they find remote work difficult because the demands of the constituents and stakeholders make them feel like they need to be in the office, or the community makes them feel as though they need to respond to the board and the county government. Do you have suggestions to help navigate this successfully?
Thank you. Great questions, Jennifer and Larkin. I put together a course on how to negotiate remote work arrangements with your boss. So if you go to our websites, remoteworkcertificate.com, or just Google remote work Utah, and you'll find it. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can show. Really, it's data that is so important. So it's important for leaders, and that's our stakeholders, to a lot of times they look and they see, oh, if you're not in your office, you're not working, right? And so that's managing for presence over performance. And so we have to be clear in our impacts. I have a colleague that says, I don't like to keep a clean office. I'm working from my office today. Our stakeholders need to see that we have a messy office so they know that we're working. and that really that like bugs me. So really what keeps our funding is evaluating our programs and making sure we're showing impact. And that means it shouldn't matter where we are within our county, whether we're working from home, whether we're on the road. I know extension professionals work their tails off at conferences, and because they're mostly on their phones doing email and doing a lot of other things while they're in the conference. And so just look around at the next conference, like people have got their heads down. They're working. Like extension professionals are extremely hardworking, and they're driven by the impacts they make or the impacts they should make. And so it's not about, I really think of like, the argument of like, oh, I need to be in my office and I need to have a messy office in order to show that I'm working. That's like a productivity theater. And the truth is we should be measured by our impacts, and we need to do a better job in extension about evaluating our programs and then communicating those impacts intentionally. And so, every year I'm making sure I'm setting up time with my county commissioners. I work at the county level, and I'm explaining those impacts. I'm demonstrating those impacts. I'm inviting them to the events in person and virtual that I'm doing, and showing that I'm reaching a broad audience. In addition, USU's done a really good job at showing the demand. The commissioners, county leaders, stakeholders, they invest in our physical space. And that's good. But we've done a really good job showing them that more people are going to our website, more people are looking at our social media channels. And because of that, we've been able to show that we need to be in more places. And sometimes we don't need to be in the office because people aren't always coming to the office. And so it's important to again, it goes back to evaluation. It goes back to using data to make those arguments and to make sure, you should be in the office from time to time, but you shouldn't be anchored to your desk because again, it's about performance, not presence. So, but take a look at that course because I think it would help you, especially if you're like trying to get more flexibility in your life.
Excellent. So talking about data-driven, our next question by Summer is that based on your research, why do you think data-driven companies like Google continue to push workers back into the office and threaten layoffs or no bonuses for employees? They continue, I understand that building leases are one reason employees may want to come back, as well as keeping downtowns busy and vibrant. But are they losing quality employees because they are not allowing flexibility?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. It's management preference, right? It's hard to manage distributed employees. And if you look at the employees that were laid off from Google, it wasn't the new employees. It was the ones that were there for 20 years, and they got an email after 20 years saying, "Hey, well, thanks. Here's your severance package." So it's hard. And so, but they have caved a little bit, especially with Apple and other tech companies. They are like, okay, we want you in the office more. And then employees push back. It's not what the employees want, but also employees don't always know what's best. And so leaders, they need, these companies need to be innovative. They need to be collaborating. They need time in person. And so remote work is being fully remote. It may be what the employee desires. And it's great when you're hunkered down and you're writing and you don't have those distractions and you can show that, hey, I increased productivity. But you want to make sure that your skills don't get stale, that you want to maintain these positive relationships. And so employees should be coming into the office regularly, coming into central work locations. But we've seen like Automatic, they build the WordPress infrastructure that powers a third of all of the internet. And they've done that without a central office location. Now they come together at least twice a year at conference centers and hotels to collaborate in person, because collaboration and mentoring, they happen best in person. And so trying to do those virtually, it's not as good. And so we need to look at what type of tasks we're doing and what's going to fit better with remote, what's going to fit better with in person, but also at the same time recognize that these extended periods of working remote, for say months or more days per week, they're gonna have unique challenges that we need to be aware of and that we need to work to address. And so I think to again go back to your question, I think a lot of times you start talking about remote work, people say like they think that like that's what you're all about, or they think like you're pro remote work. Like I'm just looking at the data and seeing that, hey, it's the growth, the adoption of remote work has accelerated drastically. It doesn't work for every organization, doesn't work for every job. It does work for some tasks, but then there's challenges. There's things that you have to do in your business and in your operations to help your employees be productive, and there's just, they need to be done in person, and there's other things that can be done remotely, and so leaders need to expand their minds and look for ways how it can happen instead of shutting it down. So for instance, Goldman Sachs, they had record profits when all the employees were remote, but yet they're bringing everyone back, and they said that's the culture, and if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. Well, they are dealing with losing a lot of talent right now, and so there's trade-offs. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's what they want for their organization. And there should be fully on-site all the time organizations, because some people need that and some people need flexibility. And there's different stages in your life where that's, more effective than others. So younger people in their 20s, 30s, they want to get to the office. They just graduated college. They want to begin their careers. They want to make connections, and being in the office is actually a really good thing for them. But they want to travel a little bit. They have some flexibility. That's great too. People in their 40s and 50s, especially if they have kids at home, they're kind of like over it, and they're happy with where they're at. And so some of the data that's coming back, especially from the out of Stanford and University of Chicago, the survey on American working arrangements, they they show that a lot of the older generation is like, I'm never going back again. So to each their own. I think there's one last question. Is there time?
Well, we actually don't have time, but we will make sure that you get that question so that you can address it, and maybe we can share it in the materials we share out to folks. We just wanted to thank you again to Dr. Hill and our facilitators for sharing today, and thank you to all of the attendees for participating in our 2023 virtual summer school. If you would like to have Dr. Hill's contact, we're going to put that in the chat right now. Once we get all the recordings processed for closed captioning, we're going to post them to the NAEPSDP webinar archive page, along with the recording in a few days. So we really appreciate your feedback on today's session. There's a couple of ways to do that. First, we're going to have the QR code on the slide, but additionally, we're going to pop that in the chat. And so feel free to utilize those two options. And we would appreciate your feedback. And we would also love to invite you to join tomorrow's session entitled Cultivating Employee Health and Wellbeing. Thank you so much to our speakers, to our facilitators, to everyone in attendance. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you tomorrow.